Welcome to another meeting of the Colliers Wood and Northeast Mitcham Area Forum. I'm sure you remember that our last meeting was a year ago. Since there is not a great number of us, we'll introduce ourselves. So as I said earlier, my name is Councillor John Dehaney, and I'm chairing the meeting this evening. Next, Caroline, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hello. I'm not muted here. Hello, everyone. My name is Caroline Kupo-Mavia, Councillor Colliers Ward.
Lakshmi.
I am Lakshmi Atwak, a councillor for Colliers Ward.
Thank you. And Linda, please.
Hello, I'm Linda Kirby. I'm councillor for Gravely Ward.
Right. And our leader, Mark.
Hi John, hello everyone. I'm Mark Allison, a leader of the council and also a councillor for Lavender Fields Ward.
Right. And Barry, please.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Barry Causer. I'm the Public Health Lead for COVID Resilience in the Merton Council Public Health Team.
Yes. Now I see another lady here, Susanna. What is spotted her name, and there's Mark, Gail, and Rudy. Okay, so if we turn to agenda, the second item is an update from the leader of the council, Councillor Mark Allison. Mark?
Yeah, thanks John. If you don't mind, I was just going to talk a little bit about some of the things that have been happening in the area over the last year, and some of the things that I've been trying to do. But just wanted to start by talking a little bit about myself, maybe, well, actually, first of all, just saying thanks for inviting us, and you know, thanks also to Chris, who I always forget to name check every time for organising all these events. It's very good of him, and obviously I've seen other council officers are going to be attending the meeting. Barry's been at various ones that I've been to as well, and the public health team that he works for are just fantastic. So I'm saying this all now because on every single meeting that I've been to previously, I've got carried away and forgotten to do the thanks to all the fabulous staff of the council for what they do for us. So I mean, I really just wanted to start by saying that that I think Merton's a great place, and I just think that the community and the way that it's come together has been really inspiring and kind of almost emotional, thinking about the way that everybody's come together. As far as I'm concerned, I'm a councillor. I have been a councillor for nearly 20 years. Which feels like a long time, but I know there are some of you on this meeting who've been doing it for even longer than that. I represent, and no offence to everybody else, the best of the wards in this area, which is Lavender Fields. And for those who don't know, Lavender Fields is kind of on the edge of both Mitcham and Colliers Wood, but it's also an important part of both. So I'm very local, and I'm very proud of the area that this meeting is representing. More widely, I was born in St Helier Hospital. I've lived in the area all my life. In fact, when I moved to Mitcham, it was and still is the furthest I've ever lived from St Helier Hospital. So I'm just very rooted in the local area. I'm very proud of the local area, and I suppose one of the things that's occurred to me in my time as being leader has been what a great community it is, and how it's a community where people care about each other, look after friends, neighbours, and so on. And that's really important. And I just want to extend my thanks to everybody for that. But as well as being a great community, there are also huge challenges facing the area and facing the community. Mitcham, and to a lesser extent Colliers Wood, but Mitcham certainly is the most disadvantaged part of Merton. And although things certainly have improved, or did improve in the first 18 years that I was that I was a councillor. I think that the pandemic means that the last 18 months, as opposed to 18 years, possibly some things have gone backwards. So I've talked about on previous occasions the way that in particular our schools, in my time as a councillor, they've improved enormously. And the life chances of our young people are incredible compared to when I started as a councillor. You know, truthfully, if you went to a Mitcham school 20 years ago, there weren't very high hopes for you. You probably would have left with next to nothing. And now I would say that you will probably leave with very good qualifications, and there will be an expectation that you will go on to further and higher education. And I think that's great progress that we've shown. But the progress we've made in so many areas like education have, since March of last year, seem to have gone backwards in other areas because of COVID-19. And a lot of that change in direction has really hit places like Mitcham and even parts of Colliers Wood the hardest in the whole borough. So, you know, I'm very, very passionate about improving the life chances of those who need it in Merton the most. And as I said, in my time as councillor, I think we've made progress with our secondary schools, as I've said, but also we've made progress in other areas as a council. So we're one of the councils that's always provided full protection under the council tax support scheme. We've got one of the most generous council tax support schemes in the country. Still, a time that the government's tried to take that away, but you know, and that's coalition governments, so both Conservative and Liberal Democrats attempted to remove council tax support for our most vulnerable residents, but we've resisted it here in Merton. We've also seen progress like, well, in Morden, there's been a new leisure centre, but obviously here in Colliers Wood, we've seen a new library, and we've also seen new homes, new affordable homes for people in the area. So I'm very passionate about being inclusive and about making progress. What I would say is that Colliers Wood and North East Mitcham are probably among the most diverse areas in the borough. I'd just like to focus on that for a second, because this is Black History Month, because my wife and my son are both mixed race, and because I live in a mixed family. So I want to make sure that you all appreciate, and that the people of Merton appreciate, how important it is to think of the lives of everybody within our community. So what I've seen in the last 18 months and in my year as a leader, seen things like Black Lives Matter become more important, and that's something I'm very, very aware of and very conscious of. We've also seen things like the way that the black footballers have been treated during the European Championships, and I love my football, and I'm ashamed of the way that some people who purport to be football fans have treated our black footballers. So I am very passionate about ensuring fairness and ensuring diversity in Merton. And one of the things that I've done that I'm very proud of is that I've appointed the most diverse cabinet in the entire history of Merton. 2/3 of the cabinet are women, and a half are from an ethnic minority. So I intend to celebrate as leader all parts of our community and all its diversity. And that's why one of the first things that I did as leader of the council last year was to announce and launch something called Merton Together. When the pandemic began, I was aware of how many people in our community wanted to help each other, and I wanted to do something to celebrate that and to encourage even more of it. My wife ran a food bank prior to the pandemic, and since the pandemic began last year, that food bank has grown enormously, and I've helped her to run it, and we've gone on to do other things as well. So I've seen close at hand the increased need, but I've also seen that as well as that urgent need for help, one of the things that I've been struck by within the community is the way that so many people have wanted to help to make lives better for everybody. And through my work at the council, I've seen extraordinary efforts by many, many people within our community. So Merton Together was a joint campaign with our partners in the voluntary sector, the health service and so on, to kind of come together with our residents to support them, to help them to get involved and to give support to those residents who need it the most. And I do think that that initiatives like that have made a huge difference. Talking more widely about COVID-19, which has obviously been the dominant thing of my time as leader. It's been weird, a bit different, being leader of a council during COVID-19. For a start, obviously, we're still not meeting in person, and that's kind of not been entirely normal, and we've had to make adjustments. But we also have to recognise that for many people, as a result of COVID-19, things will never be the same again. And I think we need to reflect on that tonight as well. And I would say that I think that the council, working with the NHS and working with other partners in the voluntary sector, have done a really great job in keeping everyone safe, or as safe as they can be. But the reality is that many people have lost loved ones during this pandemic, and it's very sad. And I think that that lessons probably can be learned about the management of COVID-19 nationally, and how more could have been done to help people. So those are the kind of the most profound ways that COVID-19 has affected everybody. But whilst some people have lost loved ones, other people have been impacted in other ways. They've lost jobs, or they've struggled financially. And I think we as a council have been very conscious of that, and even in slightly trivial ways, we've been affected. We've got to get used to a new way of working. I don't know whether, Chris and Barry are joining from the office or from home, but there has been a lot less going to the office and a lot more working from home. And that's possibly a good thing. And it may change the way that that councils and other services and other businesses operate. That might be good, but it's certainly a change in the way that that people run their lives. And I'd like to think that that as a council we recognise that, and we recognise that it has implications for the way that the council operates. So that's why, as leader of the council, one of the things that I wanted to do this year was to carry out a really huge listening exercise across the borough. We've called it Your Merton, because I wanted to listen to what you and what residents want from Merton, what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy, things that we do well, things you want us to improve on. And it's been one of the biggest consultation exercises that the council has ever undertaken. There have been more than 10,000 interactions with people telling us what their priorities are, and what they want to see from the council in the wake of the pandemic. So we're still ploughing through the responses that we've got from Your Merton. But I think a few things have emerged from what we've seen of the evidence so far. And I suppose the one overriding thing that comes through is the sense of how much people love the area and love their community. You obviously love the parks and open spaces, which the council's kept in a good condition. But you've also loved the way that that people have come together to help each other during the pandemic, the Merton Together stuff that I was talking about earlier. And we're all spending much more time in our local area, and we're probably spending more time around our homes than we ever did before. We're not going in and out to London like we may have done before, or to visit family because we've been stuck here. And some of that's been good, because people have been grown to enjoy the area. But it also means that people are much more conscious of the area around them, and things like the condition of their high streets and how important those are to them. So not just the parks, but the high streets matter to people. So we're very much still in listening mode about what it is that people want. But I would say I've announced it at the other forums as well, that 3 major things have come out of the Your Merton exercise, just to show that we have been listening. The first is that it's come across pretty loud and clear that people are worried about the cost of living. So one of the ways that we were responding had particular importance to people in North East Mitcham and Colliers, where incomes aren't very high, is we will not be raising parking charges. We've seen good progress in reducing pollution in the area by doing other things. For instance, we've got more school street zones in Merton than we have in any other London borough. And so, we think that there are other ways to improve the local environment and reduce pollution without raising parking charges or increasing the cost of living for people. I've also heard loud and clear that a lot of people, if you've been through what you've been through in the last 18 months, where you've been stuck at home, imagine if that home was damp or it was overcrowded. Those people who have lived in damp or overcrowded or bad homes, they know the importance of living in a decent home. So in response to that, it's come through very, very loud and clear. We as a council are going to use the money that would be due to the council. We're going to use it to support regeneration, and that's going to mean hundreds more affordable homes. And I know that was discussed at the scrutiny meeting last night. I'm pleased to say that that's been agreed by members there as well. There are more homes, and we need more affordable and decent homes for people. And it's not an easy process because land is scarce and times are tough. But decent homes is very important to us. And then the third thing that we've listened to, that we're responding on, is that although this borough, Merton is a very, very safe borough compared to most in London. It's one of the lowest crime areas in all of London. But the fact is that now people are spending more time in our local neighbourhoods. We're hearing that they also want to have more reassurance that where they live is safe. And especially after those murders recently, Sabina Nessa, Sarah Everard, quite understandably, people just want a bit of extra assurance. So one of the things that we've done is that we've announced that we were spending £1 million on upgrading our CCTV in Merton, which is going to improve the quality of the images available on CCTV and also improve the capabilities of the system to run our CCTV. So those are 3 things, John and everyone on the call. But they're not going to be the last things. They're not going to be the last ways in which we respond to what people are saying. We're still digesting everything. And I don't for a moment think that Merton is a perfect place. But I do think it's a really nice place and a really nice community, and so there's lots to build on there, and lots of ways that we can improve things further. And I should stress as well, since I'm on home territory here, that North East Mitcham and Colliers, this is the last forum that I'm going to do, so hopefully it's a while until the others can have a go at me. But North East Mitcham and Colliers is the best part of the best borough of London as well. So thank you for that. And I just think that generally, we as a group in all of Merton, but particularly here in North East Mitcham and Colliers, we've done amazing things to keep our friends, our families, our neighbours safe during the pandemic. As a council, we've done things like we've kept the parks open, we've kept refuse collections going throughout all of it. We've made sure that our schools have stayed open and done our very best to give our children a good education. We've even done things like provide free school meals for children when those were taken away. So, I mean, I really do think that together the community and the council have done a lot to ensure that Merton is a brilliant place. And I'm really, really proud of all the work that's gone on. It slipped my mind again, but I also should just say, as one of the highlights, during the pandemic, AFC Wimbledon have come home as well. And they're a sort of like a small part of our community, but an important part of our community. And I'm very proud of them. I'm very proud of their fans, the fans that have set up the new charity, the Dons Local Action Group, during the pandemic to get, you know, to provide the kind of help that I was describing earlier, about getting help to those who need it the most. So, you know, we're a great community, and thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm really, really proud of the whole area, and hope that helps, John.
Yes, thank you for that update, Mark. And I'm sure there are questions. Are there any questions for Mark? Does anyone wish to ask Mark a question? Any questions for the leader of the council? No, I suppose they'll leave it for later on. Okay, thanks for that, Mark. So can I ask our London Assembly member, Leonie, to address us? Leonie?
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
You certainly can. I think I just need to rebalance my machine, because otherwise you're just looking at the top of my head. I was very tempted to ask Mark lots of questions, but I won't.
Well, you can do that before.
You haven't invited me here to ask Mark questions, but it's lovely to see you all, and it's lovely to be even virtually in Northeast Mitcham and Colliers Wood. And it would be so nice to be back together again.
We can't see you, Leonie, but never mind.
Can you not see me at all? Can anybody see me? I can see me.
I can see you, Leonie.
We can see her.
Okay. Yep, Zoe can see me.
Oh,
Sorry.
yes, you're over there on the right. I see you now.
Okay. Let me.
Yes,
I was going to say I can turn off and turn back on if that helps.
no, we can see you now. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So just to give you a sort of rundown of what's been going on at City Hall and the things that we've been working on, just to pick up on one of the threads that Mark was just mentioning. Obviously, COVID has been quite a concern for not just the Health Committee, but also all Assembly members. And I think it's quite worrying that although we're trying to do our best to get ordinary members of the public, Londoners, to wear masks on the tube, because there isn't the general requirement for people to wear masks, it does seem to be much more difficult to get people to wear them 100%. So that is an ongoing thing that we press the Mayor very hard to introduce that requirement on public transport. And given the case numbers that we've just been hearing today, and the numbers going up going into hospital, we are quite concerned, and also talk of a new variant. A 20-minute tube journey when you're at close quarters in somewhere with poor ventilation, that is definitely long enough for transmission. So anything everybody can do on this call to really encourage people to wear masks, particularly on the tube. I think buses are slightly easier because you can open the window and you can have that slightly improved ventilation. And we know that lots of people have been double jabbed across the country, but it's still a bit lower in London. And if you know anyone who's eligible for their booster, and that includes flu, obviously encouraging people to take up their booster shots as soon as they can, it would be a really good plan. You may have heard that there's just been a mayoral report that has come out, which shows that there is a link between poor air quality and a greater risk of COVID-19 hospitalisation, which I think gives added impetus to this month's big change, which is going to be the expansion of the ultra-low emission zone. I was just at a meeting earlier on today in Wimbledon talking about this and got asked some questions about it. And one of the things I would just say is that it's coming out to the North and South Circular, but it won't include the North and South Circular. So if you're driving along the North and South Circular, you won't have to pay the charge. And the charge will only apply to petrol vehicles that are older than 2008, and you can go onto the TfL website when there's a checker just to see if your vehicle it will be eligible to pay the charge or whether you won't. And it's diesel vehicles that were built before 2015. So that's coming soon. In fact, on the 25th of October, so that's coming up really soon. We've been pressing the mayor on the issue of helping people from Afghanistan, and there's a lot of boroughs that have had people put up in hotels, and we passed a motion welcoming the government's commitment to help 20,000 refugees. But obviously, it's no good the government making that kind of statement without then giving the help to local authorities, and that's absolutely critical. You can't ask local authorities to take on extra responsibilities without giving extra funding and support to local authorities, and there's been quite a lot of that, and it does make things really, really difficult. London councils, the coordinating body for all the 32 boroughs and the city, has been working together, all the councils trying to work together, including with the mayor, to try and coordinate donations from Londoners. And obviously there's been an outpouring, absolute outpouring of generosity, which I think is, that is London, that is what we're like. And locally, Don's Local Action, I mean, what a fantastic response to COVID that has been, and it still continues. And I think it's amazing that we do see that ongoing generosity. The mayor has announced money that's going to groups, new funding for community groups, £400,000 to continue to fight against hate, extremism and radicalisation. And this is building on the Mayor's Shared Endeavour Fund, which delivered projects that reached 600,000 Londoners. Now, obviously, in the current context of what's just happened with David Amos being murdered at his surgery, and there's a number of councillors on this call. I'm sure many of us do surgeries where we are completely alone. That everybody needs to be reviewing the situation. Certainly we're reviewing security at City Hall, current City Hall, and also starting to review security at new City Hall, because as you probably know, City Hall is going to be moving to Newham. But I think it's extremely difficult, and I can't really predict how this is going to impact on us. Some people have been talking about online hatred. We passed a motion that I actually proposed in the Assembly to say that that was over a year ago now. In fact, it was well before COVID. To say that we felt that online Twitter accounts and Instagram accounts, all social media accounts, should be traceable back to an individual, so that you shouldn't have these online accounts, even if you want to tweet in some sort of random name. And some people have got some very silly names on Twitter. I'm sure we've all seen them, and some horrible names as well. You want to disguise yourself with the name, but it should be traceable. It's not acceptable, I think, for this outpouring of hatred that we've seen, particularly towards women politicians and also towards Black politicians. I think there was a piece in the paper that you may have seen about the mayor talking about, he goes everywhere with enormous security, and it's ridiculous. He can't even walk his dog. I sometimes see him on Tooting Common. He's accompanied by his wife, his dog, and and 3 members of Special Branch. I mean, what kind of life is that? He literally cannot leave his house without a bodyguard. So I think we're going to have to think about that. But the mayor is continuing to fund some very grassroots projects. So I think we need to approach it from both ends. Obviously, there's the issue of jobs and furlough coming to an end, and universal credit coming to an end. And as Mark was saying, the impacts on Mitcham is probably going to be greater than many other parts of Merton. So the mayor has been trying to offer support to people in some of the most deprived communities across London, and has been creating these creative enterprise zones to support jobs and education and training. The adult education budget has now moved to the Mayor of London, and they have been accessing money from the European Social Fund, the last round of funding that London will be eligible to apply for, and managed to get £650,000, and that's going to go towards unemployed or Londoners or those in low paid work. And there's a whole package of £11 million of funding that is going to be focused on supporting Londoners into good jobs in the sectors that are key to recovery. And there's also £5 million that's going to the Mayor's Academies programme, of which 3 million is going to support new academy hubs, which is going to try and bring skill providers, employers and other partners together, because we've got some big skills gaps. The construction industry is, people keep saying about HGV drivers, they're nearly all over 55. It's the same in the construction sector. It's got an aging workforce. So attracting people in, getting them trained up. There's many different parts of the construction sector where people could do with training. So, you know, it's a really good area for jobs and encouraging people into work there. We've had Mayor's Question Time and plenaries in September and in October. We have been questioning the Mayor and Andy Byford, who's the TfL Commissioner, about the prospects for a new long-term funding deal, which we could really do with for TfL, and obviously asking questions about the impact of the expansion of the ultra-low emission zone, which I just mentioned. The great news is that it has reduced nitrogen dioxide levels by up to 44%. And there were many hundreds of schools that were in areas where air quality was so poor that it's been damaging children's lungs. Now, at the moment, that's been reduced to 14 schools, but we want to bring that right down to nothing. Crossrail 1, the Elizabeth line, is still on track to open in the first half of 2022. They don't want to be any more specific than just saying sometime between January and June, you know, because they have made previous announcements, but it is still on track for that period of time, which I think is good. That it's not being you know, pushed back any further, and it will make travel east to west across London a lot easier. We've been passing motions, and we've got another plenary is coming up soon in November, but we've been passing them on maintaining the universal credit uplift, fair pay for police officers, and we don't think freezing their pay is a good plan. We called for London to have access to the National Clean Air Fund. Most of the areas with the worst air quality are in London, but we don't have access to that fund. And we talked about protection for EU Londoners who've applied for settled status, but their claims haven't been processed yet. So we've been, you know, pushing the Mayor around certain things and also writing to government. The Mayor has agreed a new housing deal with government, which is going to fund thousands of council and other affordable homes over the next 5 years. £3.46 billion has been agreed, which runs alongside the extended 2016 to 23 programme, and it should see 79,000 new homes started over the next 5 years. And I arranged a meeting so that Mark could have a meeting with Tom Copley to talk about the needs of people in Merton and what we can do to try and see some of that money coming Merton's way. And that's something that I'm going to be pursuing. And I think I can guarantee that Mark will be pursuing me to make sure that I'm pursuing it as well. But it's definitely something that Mitcham and Colliers and all parts of Merton really needs. Violent crime. I've had a couple of meetings with. We've been talking to Sophie Linden, not just about violent crime, but also about the Wayne Couzens verdict, which has been shocking. A lot of women councillors signed a letter, which was, you know, talking about the need to respond. At the moment, with the inquest into Stephen Port, who was mass murdering young men in East London and then putting the bodies in exactly the same place in the same graveyard, and nobody noticed that that these murders were identical. There is some unconscious bias in the Metropolitan Police Service. It's quite clear. They do need to look at themselves. There's been a number of investigations that have now been announced, and that's something that the Police and Crime Committee and the Assembly members, the Labour Assembly members, are going to continue to. You know, we are going to be looking at this very closely. You know, it's created real difficulties, I think, in certain communities, the Black communities have, and I've held a couple of meetings at City Hall with people from the Black community in Merton who asked me to host them, and talking about, how do you build that confidence in the police? How do the police get that confidence with women? And how do they build confidence with the LGBT communities? So, because just overlooking things isn't good enough, and the stories that have come out about how various things that Wayne Couzens was doing in WhatsApp groups and his behavior and his nickname, it's all very, very troubling. There's clearly a lot that still needs to be looked at in the Metropolitan Police. So just to give you a flavour of the things that we've been looking at and considering in City Hall and locally, and I'm very happy to take some questions as well, Chair.
Yes, well, thank you, Leonie, for that update. Any questions for Leonie, please? Questions?
I can see a couple of points that have come up in the chat. If I just pull up the chat because they've popped up on the screen.
Yes. Okay.
Oh, I think the first one might actually might be for the leader, not for me.
Not for you.
Are they both for me? No, the first one says that I'm the chair of the Colliers Residents Association. That's Suzanne. Hello, Suzanne. Oh, but it does say, could the leader provide a summary? I'm also happy to provide that. I've tried to do that this evening. On the question of enforcing masks on public transport, from Rudy Leone. Hi, Rudy. It's always nice to see someone called Leone on the call. I'm not biased. It's a really difficult thing. And we employ people to drive trains, drive buses, collect fares, and all the rest of it. There are British Transport Police, BTP. There are station staff on the upper concourses and in some of the ticket offices. There are some enforcement patrols, but I think the general feeling is that people should self-enforce rather than having police jumping onto the tube trains every day. It absolutely is an issue. I travel on the tube every day when I go in and out of City Hall. Depending on the time of day, I think actually more people wear masks when it's crowded. It is what I've noticed. I think when it's less crowded, people seem to be a bit more lax about it. But it is a difficulty. There's not enough enforcement. I think but then again, I think it is. It would be a lot easier if the overall context was that everybody was being expected to wear masks. I've had constituents who've come back from, when they were able to travel, did a week in Spain, come back and said, well, everybody wears it, but then everybody goes everywhere with a mask on. And it's a bit of a mixed message that you don't have to wear a mask, but then when you get onto the tube, you do. Or when you get on the bus, you do. I think it would be easier if people were expected to wear them as a matter of course. I wish the government was being a bit stronger about it. I can see there's something else in the chat, but it's Mark answering Susanna, so I don't need to answer that question.
Okay, Mark, do you want to answer this question before we move on? No?
Sorry, John, what was that?
No, let me find out if there are any other questions for Leonie. Any more questions for Leonie?
I think Caroline's.
Oh, yes, I see Caroline is waving her hand there. Caroline.
Yes, thank you, John. Thank you very much, Leonie, for coming to our meeting, and thank you for all the information you provided. Just wanted to ask you, you spoke about lots of different things that are very relevant and very important. Access to clean air fund, which is top of the agenda now. You talk about skills funding as well, which I wanted to pick up on because, of course, because of the pandemic, people, need to be reskilled. And there were many young people who couldn't just go on to university. If it wasn't for the pandemic, they probably would have just gone on. But now they need to be encouraged to get back into studying, to get back into doing something for themselves for the future. So I think it's very important, this skills fund. I was just wondering how soon is it going to be available and, to local authorities, and basically has solely be available.
So there's quite a number of strands of the skills funding that are available now, and there's also the Mayor has the control of the adult education budget, and it's slightly complicated because some of it is being delivered in partnership with adult education colleges, and they've also been working through the details with city and guilds and organisations like that. It might be easier, Caroline, if I reply to you offline, because then I can collate all the information together in one place, unless everyone else is very keen, but I can give you probably more detail on all of that. So I think that might be useful.
Thank you.
Right.
I'll make a note of that as well.
Yep. Any further questions for Leonie? Karen? No? No more questions, Leonie. So thank you very much for that update. Now I see the other question in chat is Mark has already asked the person to email him on whatever to tell her whatever she wants. So it's not a question really. Okay, so we move on to Dr. Navdeep. He's going to tell us all about the local cancer services in the borough.
Chair, would you think I'm terribly rude if I go?
No, I certainly. I think you have answered whatever question you were asked, Leonie, and since you have another engagement, it's
Thank
fine.
you, Chair.
Thanks for coming, and we appreciate it, the update you have given us. Okay, bye. Bye.
Thank you, John. And yeah, I guess one or two people may have been here for similar presentations from before, so feel free to send your video off if you've already heard this one. So nice to meet you. I'm Nav. I'm actually a GP in Rains Park, and I'm also currently the cancer lead for Merton, representing the CCG, as well as the Macmillan GPs. I also work for the charity Macmillan, essentially. And today's update is about talking about cancer care in the current pandemic, the effect the pandemic's had on cancer services, and what we're doing about it to try and fix it. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just be brief and give overviews. We're going to talk about what the pandemic's done to cancer care in Southwest London, focusing on Southwest London because we act as one now. The boroughs of Merton, Richmond, Wandsworth, Kingston, Sutton all act together in partnership, and so a lot of data is compared between boroughs across Southwest London. We talk about urological cancers being a particular concern, lung cancers in some boroughs, as well as focus on what events are taking place in Merton and neighbouring boroughs to help with cancer catch-up, and also what's happening in general practice with regards to primary care networks and what relevance this has to cancer catch-up. Next slide, please. So this is a really brief chart that describes where we're at pre and post pandemic. And without going into every single detail, I want to focus on the top three there on the chart. So we can see that urological cancers were the ones that were most affected by the pandemic across Southwest London. And if we look at the numbers, there were 380 sort of fewer cancer diagnosis of urological cancers, including prostate cancer and bladder cancer, during and after the pandemic compared to before the pandemic. Breast cancer has also an issue when it comes to cancer catch-up in the pandemic, and we know that's been quite a major area of concern, mainly because of delayed screening services due to COVID complications, not being able to screen as many patients safely, and also patients not necessarily wanting to be screened during the middle of a pandemic. Lung cancer is also a particular problem, particularly around some parts of Southwest London. And again, it may relate to people who are at risk of COVID, not wanting to expose themselves, people with long-term lung conditions staying at home, not going to see their doctor, and so forth. Next slide, please. So this is a kind of a really interesting chart that gives the numbers in real terms. If you look at the charts on the right, we can compare ourselves with neighbouring boroughs. If we look at prostate and bladder cancer, fortunately, Merton is actually doing okay compared to other boroughs. When I say okay, I guess it's hard to find the right word, because any delayed diagnosis of cancer, no matter how big or small, is still a problem. But if we look at it in real terms, we were about 8% lower post-pandemic, which equates to about 7 individuals in the borough of Merton with some sort of urological cancer, which is undiagnosed. But of course, if you compare that to other boroughs, we have a better statistic and are doing okay in that respect. But clearly, this is a major concern in areas like Croydon and Kingston. Breast cancers, unfortunately, Merton is up there with a lot of the other boroughs in terms of delays in diagnosis. And as I said, it was real issues with screening. A lot of women didn't have their screening tests during the pandemic, and so there's a major catch-up. There are plans to hopefully catch up by March 2022. That's the target figure that we're working on, and there's a lot of effort going to that. When it comes to lung cancer, unfortunately, Merton as well is not doing too bad compared to somewhere like, for example, Wandsworth. And there's about estimated 3 patients with lung cancer, early lung cancer, that may have undiagnosed cancer compared to pre-pandemic. Next slide, please. Just a really summarized view on the urological cancers. We know that majority of the urological cancers that are delayed in diagnosis are prostate cancers. Also important to emphasize that prostate cancer is very much more common in certain ethnicities. It's much more common in Black individuals, and so it's really important that we emphasize the message in the right places about the cancer, the symptoms of prostate cancer, what to look out for, and when to see a doctor. And we think there were delays due to certain blood tests not being done. So a PSA test, which is a prostate cancer diagnosis tool, not done as often during the pandemic, because it often does an add-on as an extra test. We also know that some women may be having delayed diagnosis of bladder cancer because they get recurrent antibiotics for urinary tract infections, but don't end up having further investigations. Next slide, please. Lung cancer, although not a big problem in Merton, it's always a great opportunity to really emphasize and hone in on the key messages. Anyone with a persistent cough, blood in the sputum, unexplained weight loss, especially if you're a long-term smoker, even if you're not a long-term smoker, but more emphasis if you're a smoker, needs to seek urgent attention and get a chest x-ray from their GP. Next slide, please. Quite a detailed chart here, going through all the different types of cancers and the numbers. I guess if anyone wants to mull over the specific details, if they're inclined, then they can do so. Next slide, please. So this is a quick chart slide that just shows some of the digital work that we've been working on, trying to emphasize the message about early diagnosis of cancer. Lots of campaigns on social media, particularly successful over social media during the pandemic, help get the message across. Next slide, please. We've also worked with a lot of charities, and so Community Links is a charity that's worked wonders for Merton. They provide multilingual support to try and get patients to do their cancer screening tests. So cancer screening tests are tests that are designed to diagnose cancer at an early stage, and they're pivotal in trying to improve the survivorship from cancer. So that includes things like the bowel cancer screening program, breast cancer screening. And so, for example, with bowel cancer screening, Community Links has a link where they are provided with funding to call patients who have not responded to the screening program and provide support in their language of choice to encourage them to do so. Next slide, please. So it's not just digital campaign. We know that there are large parts of the borough or large demographics in the borough who aren't digitally savvy. And so we have focused on face-to-face sort of public-facing material, bus shelters, posters, and so on. And so we are conscious that we need to provide a multi-pronged approach to our campaign. The next slide, please. So just focus on breast cancer whilst I'm on this slide. So, with breast cancer services, they're very much outside of general practice. However, still very important. The cancer screening services did modify the way they provided help. Previously, they had booked appointments, and what they did was they opened up the services to create more flexible appointments for patients to attend. And that has helped in some areas to try and drive up people actually attending their appointments, rather than having a set time and then missing your appointment and having a cancellation. They've been a lot more flexible. There's been a bit of issues with supply of radiographers, those people on the grounds who can sort of arrange and sort out individual scans. And so that's, some of the reasons why the screening has been delayed. But lots of work and emphasis on trying to catch up with that, because it's very important. Next slide, please. Just a really quick summarized view on all the different events and public and digital events, I guess, including this one. I guess this is one of them, about how we are getting our message across in different parts of the borough and also in other boroughs. Of note, we had an event in Pollard's Hill in Mitcham, actually. Really was a useful way of drumming up attention about cancer diagnosis and early diagnosis of cancer. But as you can see, lots of activity happening in this field. Next slide, please. So this is just a picture from the day. We're supported by our Macmillan colleagues, who are really helpful in getting lots of material for us. They support people who have a diagnosis of cancer, financial, emotional issues. And so it's always great to keep these colleagues with us at all times. Next slide, please. The next event we've got planned is actually on the 6th of November. It's in Vestry Hall, and we are being asked to set up a stall to talk about our main key messages. This is great because it's a public-facing event. We'll be there in person. We'll be able to meet people. We may meet the public. So we're really looking forward to this event. And I guess this opportunity for me to link in with anyone else who has any links with community halls and would like us to come and represent and talk to people about the symptoms of cancer, what to look out for, how to support relatives with cancer. And so, this is an opportunity to branch out and link in with us. Next slide, please. I'll skip this slide. I go to the next one. Quick question about what's happening in general practice. Lots of change, lots of media coverage about general practice. I'm only really here to talk about the cancer side of things, but it's important to emphasize that GPs are now starting to work together in what we call primary care networks. This is one of the key strategies of NHS England. And if we go to the next slide, we can see that cancer diagnosis is a key part of our plans. And there's a lot of work going in the background in general practice to try and get patients diagnosed earlier at stage 1 and 2. And that involves a lot of work across different organizations, the CCG, Macmillan, GP practices, RM Partners, which is a cancer alliance in our area. Next slide, please. So this is a kind of a brief overview of what we're aiming to do. So GP practices are working on their referrals, trying to streamline and improve the way we refer people to secondary care. We're working and ever providing time and effort in trying to improve the number of people having cancer screening services, such as cervical screening or bowel cancer screening. And of course, we're continuing discussions across public and in-person, digital and events to try and improve our communication across different platforms. Next slide, please. So that's a really, really brief overview of what's happening. I guess it's useful to sort of get that across, considering the amount of media attention that is focused on this. Happy to answer any sort of questions that you guys have thought of.
Thank you, Dr. Nadeep. Now, are there any questions for Dr. Nadeep? Any questions?
Caroline.
Yeah, I have a writing question, but at each point you answered my question in what you said following me putting it down anyway. But thank you for the information. I think there's a lot said in there, really. But I think my point is the face-to-face campaign that you have, which I think is the best of all, because I think residents really do need to understand and to get to grips with what you're saying. And I was just wondering if you could just make it a bit clearer. How could people contact your team if they wanted you to attend a meeting or an event? Is that a possibility? Is that what you advocating? Okay. So how is that done, please?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I mean, that's actually, we really want to push that, and that message is across the, the CCG, which is essentially the health service, the organization that runs the health service. Just from last week, Barry contacted me about this Merton, Barry, remind me what it's called, but it's essentially a weekly COVID group, which is now branched out. So I'm going to that online event to talk about these services. I think someone mentioned about potentially previous meeting about going into schools, universities, colleges to get the message across even earlier, so that people understand this, and it's almost sort of part of teaching and training. My email, I'm happy for my email to be sent across. I have colleagues who are non-medical side that can help organize and work out the logistics for these things. So my email and Stephen's email, so Stephen is from the CCG and Chris has that email. The two of us, I'm the sort of Merton specific representative. Stephen covers all of the borough as a CCG lead. So, you can email us directly, and we can sort of organize and plan events like that. Absolutely. And we're happy to to be in person to any events that we can get to.
Yeah, and also just briefly, because this is Black History Month as well, there's so many different events happening. And I know there are 3 that I'm aware of happening on the 30th. I think it's going to be a good idea, because most of the things you said, you also made specific references to BAME groups. So it's going to be a good idea if you had stalls to those events, really. But anyway, next time, at least we know now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point as well, because we know that certain demographics can be associated with poorer outcomes when it comes to cancer diagnosis and cancer care. We know that people from a BAME background have a reduced experience of cancer care services. And we know that certain cancers are much more common in certain BAME groups. And so it is really good that you've mentioned that. It's really good to actually focus in on certain places. The big one being prostate cancer and Black men. It's a much higher risk of getting prostate cancer if you are Black Afro-Caribbean. And so we really do need to focus our events. So I would love to be in contact with you or anyone who wants support. And if possible, sometimes I know it's difficult timings wise and so on, but if possible, we can try and get representation at these events.
Right.
I got my hand up.
Yes, Linda, I didn't spot it, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
go ahead,
Yeah. Thanks very much for that. Graveney's got quite a big network of local residents. We're really pleased to share that information and any events that you've got. So would that be possible for that to be emailed to us, the PowerPoint you just used? Are you happy for us to share a PowerPoint? Yeah. Yeah,
sure, absolutely. Yeah, we can do that. Chris has got the slides, so we're happy to share that information. Yeah.
Okay, but if it could be, as Caroline said, if it could be coupled with any events that you've got as well, we'll be happy to post that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So Barry, who's on the call, has set me up with a big, large Merton online forum that I'm presenting on next week, and so we can even share details of that if he's on the call, and I think that's Merton wide group, so things like that. Absolutely, I will. I'll contact Chris and give him some information about that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
No worries.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Naveed, for that update on the cancer situation in the borough. Now we have the next speaker is Barry Causer. Barry.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you for inviting me back. I was with you a year ago, and I had a quick refresh of the slides and the things that I spoke to you about a year ago, and it was about the rule of 6 and that, and so that was a very different stage of the pandemic, but still we are still in an area of challenge, shall we say. I think Chris is going to put my slides up. I think it goes without saying, really, colleagues, that although I'm talking to you today, and I work in the Merton Council Public Health team, that the COVID response across Merton has a number of different people involved. That includes the NHS, it includes all parts of Merton Council, our fantastic voluntary and community sector providers that have stepped up fantastically well throughout the pandemic and continue to do so, our residents that have volunteered in huge numbers, and also clearly the support that we have had from our elected members. So thank you very much to everybody. Next slide, please, Chris. It's very text heavy, so apologies for that, but I'm going to take you through the key points there. And what we're seeing at this stage over the last few weeks, the number of new infections within Merton, they're kind of hovering. They're stable. They're hovering around, give or take, 250 to between 300 cases per 100,000 residents. And what that means in real numbers, it's around 70 to 80 new infections every day within Merton. And these are slightly increasing over the last kind of few weeks. So although we are stable, we're kind of hovering at that point, we are very high, and that's really important. We're stuck at these high levels. And what we know is that these are being driven by the schools going back. We know that the other things that are driving those new infections are return to work, people going back after holiday periods, and people are socializing more. People are able to do more things to spend time with other people, and that has a knock-on effect on the number of new infections, number of new cases. Although we are hovering and we're high at around 250, give or take, cases per 100,000 residents, we're kind of in the middle of the pack across southwest London and across London, just so you can understand that. We are seeing far higher rates in a number of other boroughs, but that just means that we need to be really cautious in our approach within Merton and maintain our focus on the things that keep us all safe. When we delve just a little bit deeper into the numbers within Merton, what we can see is that the numbers east versus west have been crossing over throughout the pandemic. At this stage in the pandemic, at the most recent data, the number of new cases are slightly higher in the west than in the east, but there's no significant difference in that, so it's affecting the entire borough. As you can imagine, and as you will know, that the majority of those cases that we are seeing is in young people, and that's young people between in secondary age groups. And again, that makes sense. Many of these people are unvaccinated, and we have seen a number of outbreaks in school and education settings. But as well as those infections in young people, we are now seeing a number of breakthrough infections. So that means infections in those people that are double vaccinated. And we're going to come on a little bit later in the presentation on those breakthrough infections. But as well as the number of cases and the infection levels, we need to consider the impact. And so we need to think about the impact on the Nhs indicators. And what we're seeing at the moment is similar to our cases. The Nhs indicators are looking relatively stable, perhaps going up very slightly. And we know that there is a lag between infection and then admission. So we need to watch those numbers really carefully to make sure that the NHS isn't facing significant challenge there. We've just heard from Dr. Alg on the other fantastic work that the NHS is trying to do at the same time as the vaccination programme on cancer catch-ups. So it's not going to take much to overwhelm and overcome the NHS. So it's really important that we follow those messages that we've heard already this evening about wearing face coverings on public transport, etc. What we're seeing, unlike earlier in the pandemic, I'm really pleased to say that we're not seeing a significant and a large number of deaths within Merton, even with a high level of cases. And that is very much down to the success of the vaccination program and, of course, the innovation in treating COVID-19 from our NHS and academic colleagues. But we do need to recognise that a number of our colleagues have lost loved ones throughout the pandemic. Autumn-winter plan has been published. You would have heard, no doubt, or read on the news or seen the press conference about the autumn-winter plan, the Plan A and Plan V. It's been published, lots in the press about this, and it's worth reading. It's about 40-odd pages. Plan A is very much about vaccinations, test, trace and isolate, clear communications and managing risk at the borders. And then the big question today was, would the government go to Plan B? And the difference in the two is changing the communications to show the changing level of risk, introducing COVID passes, mandating face coverings in some settings and working at home. But then we come on to vaccination, and vaccination continues to be our first front line of defence against COVID-19. And the vaccination programme at this stage has four core components. The first one is what we're calling the evergreen offer. And what this means is we are leaving nobody behind. There could be many, many people that have declined the opportunity to take their vaccine previously, but actually they're changing their mind. They want to take that vaccination, the first and second dose. And so we've still got a good, strong offer within Merton for that evergreen offer. It's never too late to get those first and second doses. The second part of that vaccination program is the booster program. Again, lots in the press about this. And this is a booster in response to that waning protection. And so the booster program is for those that are most vulnerable. So that's those over 50s, frontline health and care workers, and those with underlying health conditions, to give that immune response a bit of a boost following that waning level of immunity, which means that we're now seeing some of those breakthrough infections. The third part of the vaccination program is a third dose. And this is a third dose for those immunosuppressed residents. So it's different terminology. It's not a booster, it's a third dose of the vaccine because they didn't have a full immune response to their previous two. And then the final part of that vaccination program is really important for us, and that's that universal offer of one dose of the Pfizer vaccine for 12 to 15-year-olds. And we are working incredibly hard in partnership with NHS. This is an NHS-led program, but we're working incredibly hard within the borough to support them. I'm working really hard with our education leaders, our head teachers, our school staff are working so hard to be able to get those vaccines into the arms of our young people. And so we know that there's an expansion of that program so that those vaccinations can be done in outside of school settings, and we're waiting for more information on that to come out very, very soon following this afternoon's announcement. But so COVID is still with us. It is still a serious health risk, and there are things that we can all do to help keep ourselves, our families, our loved ones and our communities safe. And these are for everybody. These are the things that everybody needs to do at this stage of the pandemic, including those that are fully vaccinated. So first of all, you've heard me say this probably a year ago, and you've seen it many, many times in the press, is if you think you may have COVID symptoms, stay at home and get a PCR test. Just that reminder of those symptoms you need to look out for: a new continuous cough, a high temperature, or a change or loss of your sense of smell or taste. However mild, if you're not too sure, if it isn't a new continuous cough, I've just got a cold, please be cautious. Stay at home, get a PCR test. The results will most likely come next day to rule out that virus, but it helps us break that chain of transmission. The second thing we can all do is to take part in regular twice weekly asymptomatic testing. These are really good. The LFT devices are really good, and there was a recent evidence study that came out last week or the week before. The LFTs, the lateral flow tests that we can all do at home, they're really good at finding those with a high viral load. So that's those people that are perhaps most infectious. So they are good enough for our purposes. And we know that 1 in 3 people with COVID are asymptomatic. So they are wandering around, they're going to work, they're going to see their friends and families, and they are transmitting the virus. To give you some numbers on lateral flow tests, in the most recent reporting, there was about 14,000 lateral flow tests taken in Merton, in the borough. 147 of them came back positive. So that's a real strong example of 147 people that didn't know they had COVID-19. They were going about their business, they were transmitting the virus, but by taking part in this program, they were able to get a positive test result, stay at home, isolate, and help keep our communities safe. For lateral flow tests, we have a good strong offer in Merton. We've maintained this throughout the pandemic. You're able to go to get an assisted test. So a member of our team will be able to help you and supervise you at the Wilson. So we've got a new testing site at the Wilson. At Centre Court Shopping Centre, we've commissioned 18 community pharmacies all across Merton to be able to support people to get these tests. Or you can collect from our network of 7 community libraries across Merton. So again, if you want an assisted test, you can get support, or you can just collect some tests at home. Some of the other things that we can do to keep ourselves and our communities safe is about presenteeism. We used to have a bit of a badge of honour pre-COVID to going to work and taking a box of tissues and having a drippy nose and going to meetings and various things to carry on through. We don't want people to be doing that anymore. If you have a cold, if you have a flu, if you have those symptoms, please stay at home. Preventing that onward transmission of this virus and cold and flu is really important to us. Ventilation, we've heard already from Leonie about the importance of ventilation in buses, for example. If you're going to meet up with someone, it's safer to do so outside, or if you're indoors, opening the doors and windows. They are things that are evidence-based. They can move the virus away. Continuing to wear face coverings in crowded places, and thinking about other people. If you're in a setting and you think that you just wearing a face covering would reduce some anxiety of individuals that are a little bit nervous and cautious, please do so. Continue with the app. The app works, it's good, it does exactly what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to identify people who are close contacts and then should stay at home because they are higher risk. And just that reminder that fully vaccinated contacts do not need to isolate, but they will be followed up by NHS Test and Trace. But those fully vaccinated contacts who don't need to stay at home, would strongly encourage them to get a PCR test as soon as they possibly can. Better Health Merton, there's no better time to improve your health. So we have a good strong offer in Merton to support residents and staff members to be a healthy weight, to be more physically active, to stop smoking, really important one for us to prevent severe COVID and those cancers that Dr. Algs referred to earlier. And really importantly, this winter, to get a flu jab. There's a fabulous offer from the NHS on a free flu jab for many, many groups. But if you're not eligible, we'd strongly encourage you to take part in that programme. For just a few pounds, you are able to access a flu jab from a local community pharmacy. Next slide, please, Chris. Apologies. This is just an infographic. This is kind of our umbrella brand for our health improvement services. So Better Health Merton, hopefully you're going to see a lot more of this. This is where we've brought together those stop smoking, weight management, flu services under a single understandable brand so that we can support more of our residents and staff to lead healthy lifestyles. Next slide, please, Chris. Last slide from me this evening is just opportunities for action. Dr. Alg mentioned that he's coming to a network next week, and this is our network of community champions. We set up our COVID community champions back in September, and we've met them every single Wednesday at 12 noon and at 7 p.m. since September. We've now got a network of 170 community champions. So we meet them every week. We give them presentations on a range of different topics, some related to COVID, some relating to, for example, the local health and care plan. Dr. Al's coming to talk to us next week about cancer screening. And it's a really good way to support the community, to listen to the community. And I think that's been incredibly valuable for me to understand the challenges and to put things in place to support our community. So they are continuing, and we're still looking for more members of those community champions. We then send them on a Friday afternoon an email with WhatsApp images, Facebook images, just to reinforce those key messages about how we can keep ourselves safe. We also have a network of young adult community champions. And so on the right-hand side of that slide, this was produced by our YAC, our Young Adult Community Champions, because they were telling us it's really complicated to understand which type of test you take. So they produced this infographic. And on the left-hand side, it shows the lateral flow tests. So those tests that you take without symptoms, and they're the things that you can pick up in libraries or go to an assisted test site. Or a PCR. If you have symptoms, then that's the PCR test that you need to take. And again, that's just an example of the kind of infographics or the images that we'll share with our community champions so that they can share with their networks. And again, noted Suzanne's message in the chat about the Residents Association. If you get in contact with me, if you would like me to, I'd be more than happy to attend that meeting to give an overview on COVID-19 and how we can work together to protect our communities. The second opportunity for action it's a webinar that's been videoed. So there were lots of questions once the vaccination program for 12 to 15-year-olds started. So again, we can share that link so that people can listen into some of those questions, listening to clinicians to answer those questions about the impact and their concerns around the vaccine. And we've seen a huge number of people listening to that website. I think there's 130 people in the webinar who have then gone on to get that vaccine. We're also aware that the things that were put in place earlier in the pandemic have had a negative impact. So we know that our clinically extremely vulnerable residents, and we have about 14,000 of those in Merton, they were asked to shield. They were asked to stay at home to protect them from COVID-19. And at the time, that was absolutely the right decision to protect them. But that has had a knock-on effect. It's left behind some residual anxiety and some concern. We've listened to residents, community groups and organisations throughout, and we've heard stories about people just not wanting to leave home again because they're still concerned about COVID, and that's really concerning and worrying. So we're developing, and we've had 2 sessions already, just a listening programme to listen to the experiences and the impact of COVID on our shielding residents, and to come up with opportunities on how we can support them going forward. So that's really important. And again, your support and your support to spread the message about that shielding forum could be really helpful for us so that we can protect as many of our residents as we possibly can. If you work with an organisation within the borough, and there's many of you that do, I know I recognise many names there, but we've worked hard within the borough, the voluntary sector, the All England Club, for example, to put money into a Merton Giving Grants Fund, and organisations are able to access some funding to help protect our communities. So the next round is due to close on the 6th of December. So again, for organisations can take part. Finally, other opportunity for action is to sign up to the Merton COVID-19 newsletter. It goes out every single Friday. It's still got relevant messages, stories, examples of the work that we've done. And that's a good way for you to listen and to hear about the latest initiatives that we've got. But finally, opportunity for action is to contact us in the public health team. As I mentioned at the start, I'm just one member of staff that's working on this to borough response. But if you have networks, if you have newsletters, if you have groups and organisations, whether it's a football club, a faith group, a rugby club, a music club, a large book club, please get in contact with us. And if you think you'd like us to come and talk to you about vaccination, about testing, about post-COVID syndrome, long COVID, we'll be more than happy to come and speak to you. I think the next slide is any questions, so I'll hand back to the councillor to chair the discussion.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Barry, for that update on COVID and the general health of the borough. So we've come to any questions for Barry. I'm sure there's someone somewhere there who would like to ask Barry a question. Oh yes, it's you again, Caroline.
It's me again.
Yes.
Barry, it's just when I collected my test pack from the chemist a few weeks ago, they said that the way in which we will collect test packs would change. So I don't think that has been publicized. Could you elaborate a bit, please?
I can, and it's a really important question. So thank you for flagging that with us, Councillor. Yes, the national programme, they've added an additional step where people to go to collect their box of lateral flow tests. So I've got some here. You need to request a code, and you give the pharmacist the code before you can collect the tests. We did include this in the newsletter last week. What I would say, Councillor, and my key message here is that you don't need a code to collect from our community libraries. We've got 7 libraries across the borough. They're in good places. I know that many of our residents rely on them. They use them really many times. If you need to go to get some test kits, you can go to a pharmacy. But we also have a good, strong offer in our community pharmacies that you don't need that additional step. So hopefully that will reduce that additional step.
Yeah, I think we need to publicize that as well, that is in the library. You don't need that extra step, just to make it free and easy for people to walk in and get. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Any other questions? So Barry? Oh, yes, Mark. There's a question from the leader of the council there, Barry. Go ahead, Mark.
So I'm kind of abusing my position here, but I'm a ward councillor as well, and we haven't held one of these meetings for a year. And you know, Barry, you said at the outset that the last time you were here, you were talking about like rule of 6 and all that sort of stuff, and it seems like ancient history to all of us. So much has happened in that year, and I'm pretty confident that I've told you this anyway, but since we're in public, I just wanted to say from all of us as councillors, what an amazing resource the public health team is in Merton, and lots of little things that you've done and your team has done that have gone the extra mile to keep our residents safe. So I remember in particular back in January, wasn't it? When we had the scare about the variant of concern in Pollard's Hill, and then it started snowing. But your team was knocking on doors, encouraging people to get tested, and keeping them and all our neighbours safe in the absolutely freezing cold. I only spent 1 day with you guys, but you did it for 2 weeks. So please, from all of us as councillors, and I'm sure from all of us in the community, you know, pass on to your team and the volunteers who have joined your team in the meantime, what wonderful people they are and how grateful we are for the work they've done in our community to keep us safe. Thanks, Barry.
Right, thanks for that, Mark. Now, are there any other questions to any of the speakers? Not just Barry, any questions anyone would like to ask? Something you have missed and you want to ask one of the speakers? No? No questions. Nothing else, no questions. Well, since there are no...
John, Barney has a hand up.
Someone's hand is up.
Huh? Did you say something?
Yeah, John Barney's hand is up. So, Barney,
Someone has hands up. Where's the hand?
I asked a question in the chat. I just
Oh.
wondered what the Mark Allison said, that the Merton was making progress on air pollution in the borough, and I just wondered what that progress was.
Mark, did you hear that?
Yeah, sorry, John. Yeah, there's a number of areas in which we've made progress on pollution. One of them, obviously, is the school streets zones. So certainly in Colliers Wood, if that's where Bryony's referring to, we've got the area around Singlegate School is now a school street zone. We've also historically had quite a number of local areas where we've reduced through traffic, and we've increased those as well during the last year. But probably one of the biggest things is we've been looking at the data about car ownership. And we're estimating that during the pandemic, it's about 15% of people have changed cars to lower emission vehicles. So that's all helping to contribute towards reductions in overall emissions. Obviously, I'm not saying that that there isn't pollution. There are some areas where they are, particularly, if you're looking at where in Colliers Wood, for instance, where the three directions kind of like come together from South Wimbledon, then the journeys that come from Morden along Moranton Way and from Mitcham through Christchurch Road, where all of those converge together, creates and then goes from 2 lanes down to one. There's always a bottleneck there, and there's a bottleneck further up going up towards Tooting and reverse directions at different times of the day. They are intractable problems that will be with us for some time, but a big thing that will make a big difference to people is what people have been doing, which is reducing the amount of emissions of their cars and switching to different vehicles.
Right. There are a few questions in chat here, and one is, it says, on the open forum, Rudy would like to raise waste management. Question on waste management. So can you deal with that, Mark?
Sorry, John, I'm just trying to get to it and read it.
Oh yeah, get to read it. It's
So it's asking what we think about the state of the streets and
yes.
Waste contract enforcement.
That's right.
I suppose one of the things that's kind of come across during the pandemic, and in the conversations I've had with people, is concern about this, and I'm very keen to be seen to be listening to people on the issue of waste. Obviously, people have been spending more time at home and not less at the office, and that's created an increase in volume of waste for some people in their homes. It's also maybe created a situation where bad people who don't put out their rubbish in line with what our ask is, they leave it on. They're at home more as well, and they leave it on their street corners more. So we do need to, up the enforcement. We do a lot of enforcement already. A lot of fines are given out. Forget how many at the moment. I do apologise that we've given out. It's a significant number, and it'll be something that we'd be looking to continue. So Councillor Irons, who's the cabinet member responsible, has been talking today about the importance of enforcing people who dump rubbish. It's a national problem as well, fly tipping, and people leaving domestic refuse out at the wrong time in the wrong place, even though they know that it's wrong. If they thought it was right, they wouldn't be doing it under the cover of night in many cases. So it's something that every council across the country is well aware of. I think the amount of fly tipping has gone up by more than 50% over the last 5 years or thereabouts across the country. So we're all very keen to find ways to tackle that problem. And I think it's more than just about education, although education is part of it. We need to educate people as to the right way to do it. But as I said, I think most of the people who do drop litter or dump fly tipping don't need to be educated. They already knew that what they were doing was wrong. What we need to ask the government for is for enough resources for councils across the country to be able to really be able to investigate who is doing the fly tipping and to properly punish them, because the costs of doing that are very high. And we would much rather, be spending the money on other important services, such as the things that Barry was talking about earlier, which is keeping our residents safe.
Yes, thank you for that, Mark. Any other question? There is no other question in chat. The one that just come up. Yeah. No. There are no other questions in chat, and no one wants to ask any other question. Any question?
John, there were a couple of things that came in advance of the meeting.
Yes.
So firstly, we had a notification from Transport for London about works they're planning on doing at Bank Station from the 15th of January to May 2022, which will mean the Northern Line between Kennington and Moorgate on the Bank branch of the Northern Line will be closed. So all services that go from Colliers Wood up to town will be using the Charing Cross branch line and not the Bank branch line. So if that does impact on your journey, you'll need to think about how to change that. They're also expecting that bit in central London on the Charing Cross side to be much busier than usual. So we're recommending looking at different options. They have got a bit on their website specifically around the Bank and Monument project. It does look like it will be quite nice when it's finished, but there'll be quite a stretch from January to May next year where things are less convenient on the Northern Line than they are now.
Right, thank you, Chris.
The other one that we had in by email, for someone who's not at the meeting, was a concern about fly tipping at the top of Caithness Road and Park Avenue, largely from flats that have no bins. Apparently the fly tippers explained that they've been told to leave their bins on the street by their landlord. So I passed that on to our public spaces team to look into. I'll find out what they say and I'll make sure I get that into the notes of the meeting.
Right. I think that's a hot spot, that Caithness Road.
I can add something. I can add something to that if you like. We had a meeting with officers about the whole of Streatham Road, because Streatham Road really is a major issue in terms of fly tipping. And one of the big concerns we had as local councillors was the number of waste bins that were there, which were an absolute magnet. And so following from the meeting, the commitment was from the council to remove 6 of the bins. So there are only 3 there in that area. And we knew that meant that the waste would continue because it wouldn't just stop immediately. But then all the houses in the roads off Streatham Road were going to be written to about the enforcement that's coming into the area with Kingdom. They are increasing the level of enforcement, and that started last week. And so, and it's also about presentation of waste as well, with Kingdom issuing £400 fines. There's been an enormous amount of enforcement work gone on particularly in Graveney Ward by Mel Higgs, who's our enforcement officer, and she goes through bags constantly trying to identify names, and a lot of fines have been issued as a result of that. But we do have a very serious and heavy problem in Graveney Ward with fly tipping, but that increase in enforcement is something that we welcome.
I think one of our problems in grading, we can't get any evidence, no names to see who's dumping where. So prosecuting people is an issue, which is very difficult to prosecute because we can't be no evidence of who is doing the dumping. Right. Anything else? Any questions? Any more questions here? I can't see anything else in chat. So, if there are no more questions, let me just say thanks to Dr. Navid, thanks to Barry, and thanks to Leonie, whether she's not here at the moment, but I'm sure she's here and know that I'm thanking her. And a special thanks to Chris, who's set all this up and have made it a success. Thanks, Chris. And we, since there is no other questions, nothing else to answer, I have to say